Let's talk about the state of Jujutsu Kaisen, Chapter 222, and what I want to see going forward. And if you like Jujutsu Kaisen content and anime content, subscribe for more. So things in Jujutsu Kaisen, even though Gojo is back, are a complete mess. Currently, all of our protagonists are criminals according to the higher-ups, because they didn't want Gojo to ever be free to consolidate their power. But given the fact that Culling Games started and Sukuna is free, maybe their opinion changed. And I'd hope their opinion changed because they kind of need Gojo to fight Sukuna right now. And he's also here now to train his students or enact whatever other plan he had in the works. And I want to talk about this because the training arc is coming, but for most characters, it's really not that important. If Miwa got buried in the sand or became a master swordsman, the story doesn't really change that much. And Yuji is on the path to become ridiculous, being soaked in Sukuna cursed energy for his entire career. While we don't know the full implications of him having Sukuna's cursed energy running through his body, I imagine it's not hurting his overall power level. Probably quite the opposite. And with us having Gojo back this early in the endgame, I mean, it's not early in the overall story, but we're just entering the final arc. It increased Gojo's death flags pretty heavily. We have all these fights to get through. Gojo's scheduled for the first round, and the first round is against the worst version of Sukuna to have ever existed. I've seen a lot of conversation of people saying Gojo's going to stomp Sukuna, or people saying that Sukuna can now stomp Gojo and other people with 10 shadows. Let's just get it out of the way, and neither one of these characters is going to body the other one. On paper right now, Gojo is still superior to Sukuna by a pretty enormous margin, 10 shadows included. I don't know why people think this fight is close on paper. Gojo has every single tool he needs to either A, kill what he needs to kill, or get away from what he needs to get away from. Sukuna and Mahoraga don't have an answer to teleport float. Even if Sukuna adapted, Gojo can always just leave and try again later, because the wheel's adaptation being on a per summon basis makes the most sense. If the wheel does remember adaptations, well, Sukuna should just be running around getting hit by anything and everything to adapt the wheel. So right now, the only option Sukuna really has against Gojo's toolkit is the wheel. His Malevolent Shrine shouldn't matter at all to a guy who can teleport. So the wheel, while incredibly powerful, and Mahoraga, while also incredibly powerful, just not enough to stop Gojo currently. And yes, Mahoraga beat a 6-size Limitless user in the past, but all that really means is it can probably adapt to infinity, because this 6-size user has 0 feats and 0 statements, while Gojo, on the other hand, actually has feats and statements, including statements from the author calling him the pinnacle of strength. So comparing these two users is pretty stupid, because we have no idea how strong the other one was. He could have been weaker than Teen Gojo for all we know. So headcanoning him to Gojo's level is kind of ridiculous. The biggest takeaways from this foreshadowing is that Mahoraga can adapt to Limitless. So again, on paper, Gojo is ridiculous, but in practice, Gojo has his brain turned into soup whenever he fights. Gojo's a pretty routine idiot with his own power set. So in this fight, I expect he's going to underuse his Hollow Purple, his teleport, and also try to fist fight the Mahoraga, because that sounds pretty dumb and right up his alley. Though even with all of that, I don't know why people think that Mahoraga is capable of fighting Gojo on even footing. A 15-finger Sukuna ran circles around this thing and spammed this mantle until he killed it with one other ability. The adaptation is strong, but it's not instant, and Mahoraga is Sukuna and Gojo fodder. The only reason Mahoraga is even relevant to Gojo is because it is under control of Ryoma and Sukuna. Mahoraga attacks weren't even enough to instantly kill an unarmored Yorzu who had her technique adapted to. So I'm sorry, Mahoraga is not relative to Gojo with its current feats. Both 15-finger Sukuna and Gojo body this thing. That being said, Sukuna's technique is not revealed yet, and it has been 200 chapters of no Sukuna technique reveal, and Gege Akatame has gone out of their way to keep this thing hidden. And not only have they kept it hidden, they've had years to think about how it's going to interact with Limitless in particular. And whatever this technique is going to be, being hidden for 200 chapters, every chapter that this technique remained hidden, it got stronger. So by the time we actually get to the Sukuna versus Gojo fight, they're going to be relative, because that's kind of the entire point of their fight, to see these two characters go all out. But who do I think is going to actually win their fight? Well, as a JJK YouTuber, I am eternally striking balance between Gojo and Sukuna fans. But I'm gonna give my honest opinion, and I think Gojo probably dies in the story. Even if Gojo like bites his thumb and then summons an army of hollow purple pandas that all have 100% resistance to Sukuna, I'd still think he's going to die or lose somehow or get incapacitated. Because Gojo's main role in this story right now seems to be to train people and then take on Megana and permanently nerf him or remove 10 Shadows. Because 10 Shadows Sukuna has gotta go. If Gojo were the main character and not a supporting sensei character, and Sukuna were a minor antagonist and not the main rival and person who has screwed over the main character the most, in that JJK, Gojo wins 100% of the time. No question, Gojo would absolutely win against Sukuna if he were the main character. But in Jujutsu Kaisen, Gojo is not the main character, Yuji is. Yuji has the most beef with Sukuna, he has the most ideological difference with Sukuna. The only other villain left in this story that Yuji could possibly fight would be Kenjaku, and he has almost zero interaction with this guy. In 200 chapters of Jujutsu Kaisen, Yuji Itadori has had one almost conversation with Kenjaku. They'll probably meet again for a backstory reveal, but beyond that, Sukuna is Yuji Itadori's final villain for his character arc, and that's just where Jujutsu Kaisen is at. Yuji going off to go fight Kenjaku now after he directly stated he wants to kill Sukuna and he'll eat anything to kill Sukuna does not make a whole lot of narrative sense. It's Sukuna. Yuji versus Sukuna is coming. It will probably be a weaker version of Sukuna than the one that fought Gojo, but they're going to fight. And as for what I want to see in the Gojo versus Sukuna fight, I just want a cool fight that makes sense. I don't want one character to win because the other character's brain was turned into mush by the writing. And I don't really have a preference of who wins this fight because both of these characters kind of deserve to get their asses beat. Gojo is so arrogant about his power that he's been pretty much asking to get his ass beat since like day one. And Sukuna is so prideful that he's been asking to get his ass beat since like 1,000 years ago. And regardless if Gojo dies or not, both of these characters are probably going to get humbled in some way. And Gojo getting locked in the box clearly didn't humble him at all. So that's enough of the super spicy Gojo versus Sukuna takes. Let's talk about Yuji Itadori and his enlightenment. Because throughout all of Jujutsu Kaisen, we constantly see characters say, oh, you have to be selfish to become enlightened, to become the strongest, the honored one. And this is part of what makes Yuji so interesting to me in this story, is that he goes against the statements of all of these different sorcerers from like 1,000 years ago and the modern day. And it doesn't really make a lot of sense for a character like Yuji to ever call themselves the strongest or the honored one. Because in a series chock full of Buddhist enlightenments, Yuji is the closest to finding a true enlightenment. And that's kind of the point of Yuji, is that he's not like these other sorcerers. He didn't grow up in this world. He got thrust into it after eating a finger. He has no idea that he is the son of Kenjaku, or that he comes from probably what's a line of sorcerers. And this is a similarity he has with Yuta, the other protagonist from JJK 0, that they were both unaware of the world of Jujutsu until they were about to be executed. And I think that this is something that Gege carried over from Yuta to Yuji when they swapped over to the main series. Because while they started at different power levels, Yuji and Yuta are very similar in core ideology. And if not ideology, they're similar in their empathy for others. And I think that's a pretty major theme in Jujutsu Kaisen, is that it's not all about the power scaling. Yuji has to prove Sukuna wrong. Where Gojo versus Sukuna is the battle of power levels, the only real emotional conflict here is that Sukuna is inside of Megumi. And on the other hand, Yuji is trying to prove Sukuna's ideology incorrect. That having a complete disregard for others is not the only path to power, and a hierarchy of power is not the only worthwhile system, and that there are other ways to obtain power that don't cause people to suffer. And I think that's more or less the point of Yuji's character in this story, because Jujutsu Kaisen is just chock full of Buddhist references. And the most surface level basic purpose of Buddhism is ending the cycle of suffering, and all Sukuna does is cause suffering. But that's just my opinion, and I want to hear yours, so let me know in the comments below. This will probably be my last video until the 222 spoilers are released. It has been a crippling and long 3-week break, but we've almost made it. And if you like Jujutsu Kaisen content, subscribe for more. And as always, thanks for watching.